So we're back from World War II and the nuclear age and on to the Cold War, which wasn't really a Cold War, but more of a standoff. As of now, it is over, but the more so the Cold War was due to the Red Scare. The Red Scare was communism, which many countries like China and parts of Russia, if I remember correctly, still do have some communistic values. And I think Korea as well, maybe. I'm not sure which one. Uh, What effect does the Red Scare have on the United States, and in what ways can we still see this today? The Red Scare was more so a propaganda, if anyone can remember the Salem witch trials, where you could easily accuse anyone of being a witch for whatever sort of reason. You could accuse anyone of being a communist for little things like they were spies, they were armed, they were going to sell our secrets to Russia, to other communist places, which in most cases was not true. We actually do see some of this today with many people not using communism, but more using other political terms like conservative, liberal, and other things, or racist in some points, homophobic, transphobic, and just throwing it out there and not really giving a reason, or at least a good reason, for doing it. So that was pretty much the Red Scare is somewhat here today, but not fully there. But we'll talk about that more in the end. A very a noble two noble people that were part of the Red Scare were Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, two Russian communists who were communists and they had communist values, who were arrested and, if I remember correctly, uh, tortured for information, not information, tortured for information, but accused of being spies and selling secrets to Russia, even though that was not true. During this time, the Berlin Wall was up, separating parts of Germany, but we'll explain more on that later, along with the space race and nuclear race. The nuclear race, too, was to who could either bomb the person first or create a bigger nuclear weapon. The space race was the most impactful one, as it was just to see who could get the person to the moon or in space first, with Russia sending a dog and a monkey to space, the dog not surviving, and then us sending the Apollo 11. All this is as well. This was a time of decolonization, with Vietnam trying to leave France and other colonies trying to leave other countries, as well as the time the Cold War ended in officially in 1991 with the Berlin Wall coming down. With the Cold War, we had somewhat of a treaty where we would regulate how many firearms we had or could possess, while it was still a very big number, it was a little bit less. Same goes to Russia, and many of the communist leaders in China and Russia were replaced and did not have as much communist views. But then we also had to accept that they could be communist as well. Now on to the civil rights movement. With the civil rights movement came Emmett Till. Emmett Till, to some, may be the spark for the civil rights movement, as he was beaten and murdered for supposedly looking at a white woman and I think flirting with her as well. He was brutally mutilated and just, it was awful, really gruesome. His body was sent back to his mother, who had an open casket funeral, so everyone could see what they did to her son. And the men were found innocent, even though they proclaimed that they what they did, and they could not be testified again because of double jeopardy, which sparked the board because many lynchings were going on even without, and no one was really stopping it. Then there was also Brown versus Board with the Little Rock Nine. Originally the Little Rock 11. No, 13. Who were some black students going to a whites only college, and they were constantly stopped, harassed, or just forced out of school. due to people not wanting this change. With the civil rights movement, they asked for no segregated schools, uh, no more segregation altogether. So no more segregated bus seats, diners, schools, workplaces, and fountains similar to that. We see a very big boycott for the buses with Rosa Parks, who was a protester and who was a very big influential politician or political standing person. But with these protests and the movements, it secured African American equal process to restaurants, transportation, and other public facilities, and enabled blacks, women, and other minorities to break down barriers in workplaces as well. Many were against this. Many, like the KKK or other white people as well. There are also many other movements for similar to many black people sing in diners and having and drinks thrown all over them and just being beaten up, or students who were driving a bus who that were bombed trying to spread the word across the country and later had to leave. But the movement ended in 1964. These were two very popular black speakers for civil rights, with MLK, which is very widely known as we have MLK Day, and Malcolm X, who I didn't even learn about until this class. MLK died in 1964, and Malcolm X died a year later. They had similar beliefs, but very different ways of seeing it. As MLK saw it as a more peaceful approach to how they go about it, along with not starting anything. While Malcolm, while he did say we had to be a little more violent, he was more so saying in defending ourselves or defending themselves from the violence that was occurring from the white people, as many were being threatened, killed, or just beaten up. They do affect how some of us see today with many protesters wanting to be peaceful and others wanting to be violent. While they may not affect us now, their beliefs still ring on to this day. Now on to the other revolutions with the Vietnam War protests, the gay rights protest, and the women's rights protest. Which went on from the 50s, 60s to the 70s, and a little bit into the 80s. They achieved. Let's start with Vietnam. With the Vietnam War and many people being drafted against their will or not wanting to be drafted, as in their opinion they were fighting people who did not deserve it, and America was only fighting because we were France's allies, and Vietnam did not no longer want to be a colonized country. And so they held many protests to the point that even other veterans gave their medals or Purple Heart, or not Purple Hearts, gave medals they had earned from the wars back, as they believed this war was not right. And many were did not even really know what was going on, as the news was being censored. But along with the Vietnam protesters, there's also the Stonewall riots, which happened in the 70s, which sparked the gay rights movement, as many people were arrested for being gay, transgender, and other different sexualities. They asked for to not be segregated or to not be forced not to work. I don't know how to explain this. There were many laws and rules prohibiting that if you were gay you could not work, and many senators or politicians were being blackmailed for being gay. There was even a California senator who passed a gay law and was later assassinated and killed. But along with the women's movement came birth control and Roe v. Wade, which allowed legal abortions, which was overturned this year. Birth control was a whole new thing, which allowed women to control their pregnancy and allowed for more control than others. Many were still against it, some being women who did not want to lose what they had, and many just believing that it was not right. Cries of the 70s. The Cries of the 70s was the Native American movement as many of the children bodies from later tribes were found and dug up, and many Native Americans wanted their land back that was taken from them as they were moved all over the place. This is also the Chicano movement, which was a Californian Mexican movement asking for rights and security for many things. There's also the gas shortage of 1978 with the decline of Iran oil production, which may blame on Nixon, and the Watergate scandal, which was the Democrat Party being spied on, and Nixon and his party having a big role in this, and having the people that were robbing and breaking in working for them. We know this due to Nixon's tapes as he recorded every single of his talks in the Oval Office, and this is when he left office. Many movements were still happening during this time, and some were not even ending until the early 80s. The 80s. In what way are the 80s a reactionary decade to the changes that came in the 60s and the 70s? With the 80s, a lot of the gay movement was hit really hard with the AIDS epidemic, an unknown virus that no one knew about or knew how to spread it, but knew that it was mostly in people who were gay. Many did not even want to treat this, as many as hundreds are dying due to this because there was no treatment and no one knew what it was. But also reflected on different ideals from both the 60s and the 70s. It was more open and just about expressing oneself, as we see with the weird yoga videos and outfits that were in the 80s. Also, the Iran Contra affair, which was an arms deal. So, in Reagan was elected during this time. So, during the deal, it Reagan was being blackmailed or threatened with by Iran for holding American hostages, and was persuaded to give them, I think, millions of dollars of weapons for the hostages to be returned, but the hostages were later only two were returned and then two more were captured, so no one was really saved. And later, when the deal was brought up, Reagan blamed others and did not take accountability until later. Along with this was Bush, who was elected, and also during this time was the Rodney King beating, which sparked the LA riots, who did not trust the police force after only 4 of the cops that did the beating were arrested and prosecuted, and the other 17 had nothing done to them, as even though they were watching. This was also the fall of the Berlin Wall near 1989, which would lead to the end of the Cold War, as it sparked freedom. Now the 90s. How does the 90s reflect the decades that came before? In what ways is the 90s new? And how does this influence the present day? Let's just get on to all the big stuff. O.J. Simpson. I didn't really know much about him until I looked him up. He supposedly murdered both his wife and her boyfriend in some allegations, or his friend in others. Along with this was the Clinton affair, which a lady came forth and say she was sexually assaulted or harassed and forced to give oral sex to Bill Clinton in the Oval Office. And instead of admitting it, Clinton said that he did not have sex with her, even though it technically counts as sex, which later would lead to an impeachment and him later leaving office. Along with this came the boom of the internet, with many selling sites and very, very, very early internet coming through. Anyone remember dial-up? This was between the late 90s and early 2000s, and maybe early 90s as well. Along with this came with a boom in immigration, especially Mexican and Hispanic immigration as well. And I actually had to look this up. There was 2 other bombings, one in Oklahoma and one in the World Trade Center parking lot. Not the World Trade Center itself, but the World Trade Center parking lot in 1993, which I believe would lead to the World Trade Center plane crash or 9/11 in 2001. I believe this decade reflects a lot with as it led to many more sex scandals. I kid you not, I looked up how many sex scandals there were after Bill Clinton. Holy crap. That was just some of them, and that was the important senators and not the ones just in Washington or in the other states as well. I believe this decade led for many things that we see today, as it led for many murder cases being brought up. Oh, Ted Bundy was a very big part of this. In the 80s. Ted Bundy was in the 80s as well, and this led to more. Oh, we see happening now, happening in today. How many murders do you see being broadcast on television? Tons. How many presidents or how many sex scandals or scandals itself do you see on the TV? Quite a bit. Now onto the new millennia. This is my lifetime. I was born a little bit after the 9/11 bombing. So let's just get straight to the events. The Twin Towers fell. Uh, uh, I need to go. Uh, Sorry about that. But the Twin Towers falling, which was a terrorist attack with Bush addressing the nation. Along with that came Hurricane Katrina and Barack Obama being the first black president to be elected. And along with Barack Obama came the Healthcare Act, which allowed for almost everyone to have healthcare benefits. Along with this increased globalization, which allowed for global trade across the world. But with this came an increase in global crime and trafficking of children, women, and others, which is still a very big problem to this day. This is just covering from 2000 to 2010. More events have happened, but I don't really remember them as I was a kid when this happened. These events echo how my life is today. I hear so many stories from people born before 2011 or 2001 saying how airports were kind of different, how they didn't have to really live in the fear of a terrorist or a shooting at schools, how they didn't have to live in fear of a lot of this. They're just saying that the pendulum will swing two ways. Either it will be tragedy or repeat. I believe we're in repeat right now as we are going as we are doing a lot of the stuff that's happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and late 80s or early 80s. We're just repeating what's happening. Tragedies already happened, but we don't know. We're not really listening to what's happening then. From 2011 to 2000. So, a lot's happened. There's the stock market crash of 2000, the housing crash of 2008. There was the coronavirus, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. A lot of stuff has happened that I don't believe I can name it all and give you a proper explanation, as I'm still learning a lot about it. Even making this video will be a part of history soon. A lot has changed. The internet rules our lives, probably, or pretty much. We live in a world that's divided by politics and beliefs, and many refuse to listen to reason. And many think that being social media famous is amazing. Some of it sometimes is. Sometimes it has awful benefits. I don't think we will change because we've gotten so used to the self pleasure that we forgot that there's pain as well. There's a belief, there's a theory in criminology for how they punish criminals, whether there's more pain or pleasure. That can also apply to just live every day. More people are seeking the pleasure benefit of living instead of taking the pain as well. There's two things to living: pain and pleasure. And we need to take both. That means we also have to take responsibility for our actions and wake up and see that some of the stuff we're doing is wrong. Thank you.